Let's begin with a question. How often have we said to others or to ourselves, I can do that, or I can fix that? And then, as we further reflect on what's involved, decide to change our minds. Anyone here experience that? Oh, looks like we have a unanimous, pretty much. Something happens interiorly when we take more time to consider what's beneath the surface. Either our decision is solidified, or we choose to do something else. This morning, we're going to look beneath the surface of the gospel and talk about the importance of discernment to living our lives in an authentic way. I've asked Stan to join me in offering today's homily, and he will share a personal experience related to the message. Let's first consider what discernment is. It's a decision-making process used for significant moments in our lives, such as transitions related to residence, health, retirement, to work-related issues, family relationships, or involvement in our neighborhood or other types of communities. Discernment is an in-depth consideration of all the parameters related to the decision at hand. These include practical issues as well as emotional, psychological, and spiritual ones. In discernment, it's also critical that we look ahead to see what the consequences of a particular decision might be. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, discernment needs to be done in a contemplative framework. Prayerful, quiet pondering to get in touch with our deepest self, the God within, is essential. Deeply discerning questions is important to authentically living out our lives. Stan, would you now share how your service to the communities of Morton and Springfield involved discernment?
Just a little bit of background. I served 28 years on the elected school board in Springfield, Delaware County. We serve the communities of Springfield Township and Morton in Delaware County. It's not Eileen, Springfield, Montgomery County. It's Springfield, Delaware County. And yes, that does get confusing at times. Our board made hundreds of important policy, financial, and strategic decisions after trying to apply a disciplined decision-making process or a discernment process. These important decisions we made usually involve personnel, budgets, facilities or buildings, or public relations. The specific example that I want to share with you is negotiating 8 labor contracts over those 28 years with the teachers' unions. Talk about hard work and true discernment as to what was fair and reasonable. Teacher negotiations in a local school district can become emotion-packed events with loud voices and strong forces on all sides of the issues. The teachers wanted and deserved fair compensation. Taxpayers wanted reasonable controls on future property tax increases and school expenditures. Students and parents wanted quality, creative, energetic teachers, and local political leaders wanted peace and quiet in their communities. Honestly, there were several times in the negotiations process where I personally had to step back, contemplate, and check my moral compass, to be sure that we were on the path to a fair settlement. I would then bring my prayerfully and carefully developed recommendations to our full board, and we would then together discern our next steps together. It was a grueling process, very authentic, and in my time on the negotiations table, we never had a strike with resulting disruption of the learning process for the children. I do believe that the amount of energy expended on discernment during these tough, hard, give and take negotiations ended in fair settlements. Now back to Caryl for another example of discernment.
Well, thanks, Stan, for your honest and heartfelt sharing. Before closing, I'd like to share just a piece of my discernment of my call to priesthood and how authenticity and discernment were both essential to my response. I was on the pastoral staff at St. Francis of Assisi Parish for 15 years. And the first 12 years were life-giving in so many ways. During the last few years, however, the work became less and less life-giving. My recommendation to implement a program of inclusive language, including feminine images of God for our parish liturgies, was met with a closed door, as were other ministerial suggestions. Additionally, hierarchical rules were squeezing life from what had been lively and relevant liturgical experiences. Throughout this time, I felt God calling me to something different. I just didn't know what that something different was. So I entered what turned out to be a 2.5-year discernment process, accompanied closely by my spiritual director. Although I struggled with the reality that God was calling me to leave my beloved parish of 55 years, I was at peace with the letting go and moving into the unknown. To be authentic, I knew I could no longer be in a place that violated my person and my sense of call. In that liminal space, I needed to trust deeply that God would show me the way, and I felt free to authentically respond to the call from the Spirit deep within and moving in community. Within a few weeks, it became clear that I needed to discern a call to priesthood through Roman Catholic Women Priests, RCWP. Later, when accepted as a candidate in RCWP, my discernment question became this: am I willing to listen to the Spirit of God and do what God asks, no matter what the cost? Or will I follow a man-made church rule and say no to the Spirit of God? After deep soul searching, I finally said yes to the Spirit, and was then able to live outwardly the call to priesthood that I felt deep within. Throughout this discernment process, the Spirit drew me into greater authenticity. Every one of us discerns personal and communal issues. I encourage each of us to stay on a contemplative path as we listen deeply to the God within. Perhaps this week, as we celebrate the feast of Francis of Assisi, a deep listening while in nature could help us discern more clearly whatever issue we are presently facing. May your discernment lead you to ever-deepening authenticity.